This is the Mile High 5 podcast with Carl Jensen and Doug Cunnington. We have authentic conversations about the journey to FI, health, happiness, and some very odd tangents. We interview FI experts, side hustlers, people on their way to FI, and those who have reached the other side. Join us every week, and if you want the show notes and links and all that other stuff, head over to milehighfi.com. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Mile High 5 podcast. I'm Doug Cunnington, and I have a special guest today because Carl is on a trip traveling, or he's sick, or he's not here. That's all I know. So I have my good friend, Amberly Grant. How's it going today?
Excellent. I'm so excited to be co-hosting with you today. Bye, Carl.
This is going to be great. You were on the show before we interviewed you, and you are in a different location today. So for the people that are not watching on YouTube, this is a rare time we're doing like a remote interview. Well, really you're co-hosting because we're going to cover a topic today about you had a good title. I'm going to let you mention it. So what are we covering today?
Yeah, academia, is it worth it?
And we're going to dissect whether the sort of traditional 4-year college degree model of secondary education, is that something we should keep doing? Are changes necessary? And we're going to dive into many different areas. Now, before we get into it, Amberly, for people that don't know you, can you give a little intro on your background? Like, what do you do now? Maybe a little history, and then we'll start diving into the topic area.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Amberly Grant. I actually got an idea about this topic because I run a Tuesday group, which is called Fin Talks. We meet every single Tuesday since March of 2020 to talk about different financial topics. I get to choose those topics, which causes me tons of anxiety on a weekly basis. And I like to pose questions to my audience, which is, our 40 to 50 attendees every single week, to think about the topic in a new and different way. So this past Tuesday, we did this topic of academia, is it worth it? And it was a really lively conversation. I wasn't sure how it would go, but it turns out that everyone has an opinion based on whether they went to university or didn't, whether they work at a university or maybe are a PhD student in research. And so it was a really great conversation. And when chatting with Doug, I thought maybe we should bring it to all of you and then eventually see your opinion. I also, on top of Fin Talks on Tuesdays, I do Instagram education, like financial education. So I do fun reels. I like to think that nothing is off limits. So taboo topics, as well as, kind of making fun of myself and different characters. It's really fun to take financial topics and make them fun and digestible for just general people, not just a FI audience.
From your Instagram reels or post or whatever, what's been like the most popular one? Did anything like kind of get tons more views? Anything kind of funny with that?
Yeah, actually, so I went viral. I have a lot of Airbnb, and it turns out if you post anything online about Airbnbs or being a landlord, even if you try and do it right, people hate you. And so I have over 4 million views on one of my videos, or my reels. And that one is literally just about keeping things stored in your Airbnb. So just having a magnet cabinet lock so that it's like really nice and looks good. And you can put like a little do not open for your Airbnb guests so that you can keep your towels and other additional toiletries or cleaning supplies in cabinets and making it look really slim and fresh versus a big padlock on there. So that's actually my most viral video. And then I had another one that had like almost 1 million views. And I'm trying to remember, it was one of my quirky ones where I have like me as 2 different characters, and I can't remember what it was.
Okay. Well, I have actually stayed at one of your Airbnbs, and it is so tempting to try to open those locks or open those cabinets that have the magnetic. It's like do not open. It's like having a
Yeah.
button that says don't push. Like all you want to do is figure out how to get in there. So there wasn't anything like super cool. It's just like towels or something.
Yeah, literally towels. And it's funny because people online were so hateful towards like, why are you locking towels away from guests? Well, because people need to only get what they need, which is 2 towels per person. And the cool thing is we've had it where a guest very last minute, like as they arrived, said that they had additional guests they didn't tell us about. And so I was able to guide them to where the magnet was to open it up themselves and get their own towels, which was like really nice. So if someone was really curious, I'm more than happy for them to open it up. Please don't break the lock, but just like check it out if you want to. There's just white towels in there.
It's like a scavenger hunt. I'll have to tell my wife next time because I was like, oh, don't open those. She was very curious. Like, we got to get into those cabinets, and I'll
Yeah.
tell her next time. Just hunt around. There's like the little unlock thing. So,
Exactly. And it's
okay.
funny because people online are like, well, now thanks for telling me the secrets. I'm going to bring a magnet every time I travel. And I was like, you're going to bring a magnet every time you travel to possibly maybe the Airbnb host has used this as a method, which I've never seen before. So, which is why my video probably went viral because it's a new and novel idea. And I just like people are funny online.
Yeah, I always have magnets with me anyway. So,
Yeah.
okay, let's move on and we'll talk about our own college experiences just to give people kind of a foundation and understand where we're coming from. I think we probably both have, I mean, everyone has their own biases on certain topics. So people can understand why our opinions are the way we are. So, Amberly, tell us about your college experience.
Well, I like to say I have 3 different college experiences. One, I'm from Canada originally. I'm from Ottawa, and I moved from Ottawa to Los Angeles when I was when I was 19 years old. And so the day I turned 19, I hopped in my car, drove down to LA, and stayed there for like a year and a half. I ended up living with students from Loyola Marymount University, and I worked, full time at a bar in Hermosa Beach, and lived right beside LMU. And so I got to go to all of the sorority and fraternity events. I got to go party at the school, but I never actually had to turn in a paper or do an exam, which was really nice. So I feel like I got like the traditional American college experience without actually having to do any of the work involved in it or like the stress of it, which was really nice. So that would, I would say, my first college experience where I never actually paid tuition or actually attended college. Second, I attempted to go to university because I was in Tucson, Arizona, dating a guy and figured I should have more reasons to move to Tucson than dating someone. So I started community college there. And let me say, it ruined me for life in regards to tuition prices because I think the entire year was like $700. Um, and that was incredible. So it was like maybe $350 or $400 a semester. And I did one semester, dropped out. I did one semester, completed 4 classes, started a second semester, dropped out, just wasn't ready for it mentally. Like I never anticipated myself going to university when I left home, and didn't think it was the right path for me. I truthfully didn't think I was smart enough to go to university, so I just always avoided it. Um, Turns out I am smart enough, and anyone can be. You just have to find the way that works for you. So I tried that was in 2011, I believe. So I started in 2007 where I did LMU, 2011 where I did community college for one semester and got like 4 classes worth of credits. And then after starting businesses, traveling the world for, 6 years, I decided that I needed to go to university because I was running a company and I didn't know how to run it and didn't know that there were resources available for small businesses and women. So I decided I should go to university to learn how to run the business I was running. And so I originally applied actually to university in Germany and got into one of the schools in Berlin, which was a 3-year institution, but they couldn't have me until January. And I knew if I didn't start in September, I wouldn't go because I would just find something new to do. And I ended up applying to the community college at Denver, went there for 2 years, absolutely loved it. Turns out there is like 3,500 a semester, so a lot more than my last experience. And then went to CU Boulder and graduated from there from the Leeds School of Business, and got my 4-year degree.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was roughly what year was it when you were? about to go to Germany and
So I graduated at 29, and that was in 2017. If I go back 4 years, I think it was 2012 when I moved to Denver. So 2013 was when I started community college in Denver.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, so a few years later.
Okay. Interesting. And yeah, yeah. So that is like three distinct periods. With a community college, like any observations, like the community college versus the quote, 4-year degree schools?
Yeah, I love community college. And I find it, this will be something we can talk about later, but I find it so interesting how in America, people are so attached to their universities and their alumni. And also, the second you graduate, people are asking you for money from your institution. You're like, I don't even have a job. You didn't even check and see if I have a job yet. Um, I have this fondness for what community college teachers do, who they serve. It's such a different population. When I'm in class at community college, I'm in class with people who are ranging from 18 years old all the way to 40s, 50s. So your 60-year-old students, I remember one of them. And the teachers have so much passion because they've been out into the workforce. Where I found the university teachers, a lot of them came from academia to academia and are in academia. And so it was really nice to have a business teacher who did this on the side, you know, was in ran a business for a long time, high up in a C-suite level, and then he just wanted to impart his knowledge on the next generation of people. And there's just something about it that really was really important in our like university model for me to that like it's kind of like serving in life. Like everyone should be a server one time, so you know how to be nice to waiters. Like
Mhm.
everyone should go to community college to really understand what it's like to be excited about learning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. All right. So, eventually you got the degree. What's your degree in?
yeah. My degree is in business management, strategy, and entrepreneurship.
Okay. Rolls off the tongue. Perfect.
Yeah.
So for my college experience, I went to college right out of high school. I went to Georgia Tech and majored in computer engineering, which I started in that area, never changed majors or anything. And for the sort of cost, so this is further back. So this is like 97 through 2003, which the people that are good at math already figured out. It took me 6.5 years to get through.
Mhm.
And tuition back then, this was a quarter system when I first started, and then I went to semesters. But I think the quarters, I want to say it was like $1,500 for tuition.
Okay.
And then, of course, other housing and cost and food and all that stuff is on top of it, but pretty economical. And then I can't remember when we moved to semesters how much it was, but still, way less than it is now.
Yeah.
The other part is I got several scholarships,
Hmm.
and that helped a lot also. On top of that, I was part of the co-op program, which is kind of like an internship. Are you familiar with the co-op program where you're on and off?
Yep. And you kind of go, and then you can go to classes, and you go back to wherever you're
Yep, you
co-oping
got it.
or yeah.
You got it. So it's like one semester working full time, no
Mhm.
classes, and then you alternate, and you can do it for, a set period of time or like throughout if the company will continue to have you back. The pro, of course, is you get, on the job experience, you're building your network. If it's a good company, you could potentially work there after you graduate. They already know you. You come in with a lot of experience and knowledge of the internal company workings. So I did that. And of course, it takes you longer to get through school, but there's all these pros. And one of them is you earn money. Usually it's a pretty decent hourly rate. And then you could pay for your schooling. So I did that.
Yeah.
Now, the side note, and I talked about this in an episode that will come out soon. I think actually this same week that this episode comes out, but I didn't enjoy college very much. So when you talked about your first, the 2007 time period, that
Mhm.
sounds fun. You just
Yeah.
party, you do all the social things of college, none of the classes, no debt, unless you just go
No.
out a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't enjoy it that much. And part of it, there's two main reasons. I won't complain too much, but the school was 70% male when I went there. And then it's a bunch
Mhm.
of engineering nerdy people like myself. So not the most social, fun group in the world, and it's all dudes. So I I was like, I got to get out into a general population. And to hit a couple points that you mentioned, Amberly, I went that first summer. I was like, I'm gonna work at Applebee's. So I
Yeah.
worked at an Applebee's just to like be around normal people. It's fun to be a server and work in a restaurant. Like
I like
it's
I
fun.
like how you call I like how you call servers normal people, but continue. As someone who worked in the industry for 11 years, I don't know, but
Yeah.
continue.
It's a general population, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So gen pop. So yeah, so that was fun. And then I did a couple retail jobs too, like, just around
Yeah.
the holidays or whatever. So again, just normal kind of folks. And as time went on, I did start co-oping. And the thing is, I was like, I don't want to go back to Georgia Tech yet. I maybe we'll take some classes at a community college. So I went to a
Yeah.
community college, I think for 2 semesters, just like interspersed in the first 2 or 3 years. So they were kind of the normal classes. So I took like some whatever differential equations or some advanced calculus thing and maybe like an English class that I didn't want to take. So
Yeah.
it wasn't anything super critical. Looking back, none of the classes were critical, by the way, but I took a couple semesters at a community college, and I agree with what you said. It's kind of, it's a little more fun, a little more laid back. From where I was at Georgia Tech, which is a engineering school. That was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
so things have changed. But that's sort of my background. It did take me 6.5 years. I initially, and we'll let you come back and fill in any gaps as far as financial aid and money and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But for me, I got the scholarships. I was working, so I was in pretty good shape. Now, I did have a student loan from the very first quarter, the first semester that I was in school, because the advisors said, "Hey, this is a great interest rate. Get the loan, take it. Like you can use the money, blah, blah, blah." But I guess I was smart enough when I was 18 that after the first quarter or two, I was like, I don't need this extra money. Like I have
Yeah.
money that I've saved already and I'm going to be working. So I don't need whatever $15,000 a semester or whatever they were trying to loan me. I was like,
Mhm.
this is completely unnecessary. So I came out of college with, I think it was like maybe $12,000 of student loan debt, but it was just from like the first 2 terms that I was in school. And then once I realized I didn't need it, I was like, well, why am I just gonna keep borrowing money that I don't need to take?
Yeah.
So came out pretty good, was able to pay that off within like a year of getting a job. So yeah,
Totally.
what's your story on that?
Well, before I get into that, I'm kind of curious. Why did you go to school right after high school?
That's
Like,
what
what was the pressure?
everyone was doing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
no other reason. And that's one of the big things. Like if I have a couple nieces and I think I probably told them like take a year off, take 2 years off, like just go do some stuff because and I think now I don't have kids, so I could be off on this, but I feel like now kids are coddled a little bit more than we were back in the 80s.
Mhm.
So 80s and 90s, obviously. I grew up a little bit later than that, but the I feel like they haven't experienced as much and they weren't able to go out and play as kids with like no supervision as much. Again, I don't have kids, so I don't
Yeah.
know. But I know my nieces, I feel like they're pretty coddled and they have not had to go out on their own and like figure shit out. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I will definitely dive into the non-traditional model because that's my experience. And I always joke that I'll pay for two things for my kid: their counseling and their first ticket abroad.
Yeah.
But like university, I don't know. I'm still iffy on that one, and I'm pregnant, so.
Yeah.
um, but for me, for the financial thing, that was such a stressor for me. So when I went to Tucson and did my one semester of schooling, I dropped out in the second semester before I had to pay. Which everyone pay attention to those dates because you might screw yourself. And that's first semester, I think again, I mentioned it was like $400. So who cares, right? I had a serving job. It was nothing out of my pocket. Got a couple credits. Some of them transferred to Community College of Denver when I started there, or to the university. It was to the university when I went there, just for some random credits. You could bring in like 10 credits from some other institution, and that's what I did. For the Community College of Denver, I was at that point over 24 years old. So I think I was 24 and a half. And the cool thing, at 24, there's a cutoff for FAFSA. And if anyone knows who's applied for a student loan, that FAFSA determines your eligibility for free government aid and your other loan types, which are secure or secured and unsecured, I think is what it's called. I can't remember right now. But essentially, all of that comes through that one FAFSA application of what's free, what's a grant. I shouldn't say free. What is a grant? What is then, your actual student loans that you have to pay back? And because I had no estimated family contribution, so my father or mother weren't on my FAFSA application because I was now a non-traditional student, that was zero. Meaning I could get the biggest amount depending on my current salary, which was like $8,000 a year I could show on my tax returns, and then 15 the next year. So I got the most that the grant was going to allow. That actually didn't cover my community college. So because CCD was, in my mind, so expensive, I think in Colorado, we just don't fund education the way some other states do, like California, Arizona. $3,500 a semester or the year, I can't remember. Either way, it was quite a lot. So I actually applied for scholarships on top of that, and then got those scholarships and was able to come up with a bit more, and actually got paid, quote unquote. So my books were covered. And then I think I pocketed, $1,200 a semester to be able to pay for some of my living expenses, which was really nice. So community college was free. And then I had to graduate community college, and I'm Canadian. And I'm looking at CU Boulder as a really great business school. I've always known since I was young, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to go to business school. And that is $20,000 a year. And I remember breaking down crying, being like, holy moly, an in-state education is $20,000 for me to go to this school that I have to commute to every single day, an hour and 30 minutes there and then back, and by bus and bike. Like, how am I going to pay for that? And so I just, of course, applied to 20 different scholarships, got zero of them. Turns out, as a single female who's not a homeowner or homemaker is what they call them, isn't eligible for many scholarships as other people, weirdly enough. Like, you have to have kids to be like really in that running in the female category, which is really fascinating. So I applied for like 20 scholarships, didn't get any of them except for one, which then I didn't find out. So I'll go to that in a second. I also applied to CU Denver because that was only about $10,000 a year. And that one was, I guess, manageable in my mind, but to me was a lesser institution because it was a commuter school, less of a reputation than CU Boulder in regards to the United States, and wasn't my first choice. But when it came down to money, I had to figure something out. So I applied to both, got into both, and then got the call halfway through summer, like maybe 2 months before school started, that I got a full ride scholarship to CU Boulder if I wanted to attend. And I remember talking to the lady on the phone, and she's telling me this, like, you've got the scholarship, it's completely free. And I just was like, wait. Like, you're saying every piece of my tuition is free? And she's like, yeah. So I was like, should I go apply for other scholarships? She's like, no, because we'll just reduce this one. And so that'd just be more work. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I could not believe that I had essentially the next 2 years of my life figured out monetarily and didn't have to walk away with 40 grand of student debt just in education costs.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know why you got the full ride specifically, or like is there any, do you know?
Yeah. So one of the things is because I came from a community college. So there is an agreement, which is really cool. With this is part of my scholarship was this. The agreement in Colorado is your community college of Denver or whatever community college, Front Range Community College, credits will transfer into CU Boulder. They have to transfer. They have an agreement. Not every state has this, so that you can go and finish your education at a 4-year institution. And part of that is like there's some sort of credit or scholarship for non-traditional students coming from a community college background to try and get them to do university, like to actually finish university. And so that was that was half my scholarship. So I think 10,000 of that was just the fact that I actually went to community college first. So yeah, lovely. Absolutely lovely.
Cool. That's awesome. Um, okay. Anything else on your background or my background you think we should get into before we dive into some of the bullet points here?
Well, one of the things I was going to say is that with you, like you had to go out and seek jobs and opportunities to kind of get into that real world experience, where I did that first. So I traveled the world. I had my own company. I, did odd jobs. And so one of the cool things is I was able to manage the stress of school and working 3 jobs at the same time, because I was just so used to that as being part of my life, that responsibility kind of already put on me, not trying to navigate that responsibility through university. And I think that's like you said, that's a skill that maybe younger people don't have in general, but younger people who don't have life experience don't have yet. So anyways, that was just something that I really connected with, that I understood.
Good observation. So we have a number of questions, and thanks, Amberly. I'll acknowledge you put together the outline. You have a lot of different points here. So I could steer it a little bit, but I'll actually turn it over to you. So where do you see this conversation going next?
Well, one of the things that you actually just brought up is that you graduated in 6.5 years, although you worked and did school. The one thing I want to always preface these academia and higher education, when we're talking about it in this context, in this setting, especially with student loans, I'm talking about a 4-year degree at an undergraduate institution, public or private, but mostly public is when I'm thinking about this. And we say 4 years, right? Only 41% of people graduate within 4 years. Of like an 18-year-old starting university, 41% graduate in 4 years. And it was something like, I put my notes here, 59% graduate in 6 years. So I find that just something to preface the conversation with, that actually when we talk about a 4-year degree and how much it costs for 4 years, it's not 4 years, it's 5. Like add that extra year on when you're actually doing your estimates, people, because yeah, the norm isn't to graduate right away.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm trying to think back, and I know a lot of the people at Georgia Tech did a co-op or something different, and it does have a reputation, like many other schools, that it's kind of hard, and it does take a little bit longer. This was 20 years ago, which I don't know when those stats are from, but anyway, that is a great thing to bring up, because you do have to borrow money for longer, or whatever it is, if you are borrowing money. Okay.
Yeah. And on that borrowing money, like one of the things that I thought would be really interesting to talk about is interest rates for borrowers for students. And you already brought up that your advisor was like, hey, this is a low interest rate. And probably in comparison to maybe interest rates in the 90s or something like that, they were pretty large back then. But do you remember what your interest rate was?
I don't. I want to say it was around 5%, but I don't remember.
Yeah. Which seems to be kind of, I've talked to and coached people on their finances, and they have interest rates right now varying from 3 to 7%. Like I have someone who had 7.6% interest rates, and they went to school 10 years ago at this point. And so that's something I'm curious about, Doug. Like, do you think interest rates should be fixed, or like, how should we do interest rates for students?
I hadn't thought about it until you asked. I suspect I would like to see them sort of like in the same sort of competitive market as like any other loan where there's like different products and like the market hopefully can figure out like what the best fit is depending on supply and demand and the other, market components in place. So that's a kind of a long way to not answer the question of I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I was going to say that's a really non-committal answer.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And I guess for me, the one thing I think about is education in any form. So whether that is a 4-year institution or some sort of apprenticeship is a really important part of getting our population to contribute productively to our society. There are other ways of doing it. You don't need to go to university or schooling to do that. As someone who didn't do it, I was a very effective contributor to our society without schooling. But I think we need to put this in a different category than car loans, house loans, which are optional engagements in our society, where I find education in whatever form it is less optional. And if we want to have a like not a a more educated population, and again, whatever form feels right to them, then I think that we need to manage our student loan interest rates accordingly. And I think of places like Germany who have very low interest rates for their borrowers. And your interest rate doesn't necessarily kick in for a while, which I think is a great thing that we do in the United States as well, where they have a longer term. And for them, at least some of my friends had explained to me in Germany, was that until you hit a certain threshold, so you make $30,000 a year or something, you don't actually pay your student loans back because you're just trying to build up those first couple of years and work your way into a place where you can actually afford to live your life and pay back the loans, which is an interesting model. I don't know if it would work here or not, but something that I think about, that we do need to protect borrowers, which also means crack down on institutions, because we
Right.
can't talk about student loans without talking about the disrespect of students by institutions and their pricing. So yeah, that's something I think about, is that maybe we should have a better way of um, accounting for interest. People need to get their money back, plus more. But should it be at the expense of our education of our population?
Right. And well, like I said, I don't know the answer to that. What you said
Yeah.
makes sense, and I don't disagree. I think, part of it is the sheer cost of tuition as it's grown over the years. Because I know, I mean, it was pretty cheap when I went to college, and it was only like 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
the tuition that you threw out, obviously, CU Boulder is a pretty expensive school, right? Like it's one of the most
Yeah.
expensive state schools. Is that right?
I would assume so. Yeah. I haven't seen these types of prices most other places.
And I mean, this is a conversation that's happening out there, but yeah, like it's so expensive and the tuition's so high, and like it doesn't make sense, especially for certain degrees where you're not going to be able to earn much with that degree by itself, but it costs you $150,000 to get. I won't disparage anyone's education out there and mention a specific degree. We'll say basket weaving. All right. You got a master's in basket weaving and you just can't earn enough to pay back the 150K in a reasonable amount of time, at least not weaving those baskets. So, any thoughts on that? Just like how the cost has risen so much?
Yeah. I had read before that we have a lot more admin staff at universities, but I couldn't tell you exactly why it's risen so much. That's something I didn't actually take a look into. Uh, School over time is just going to cost more. Everything costs more over time, based on the fact that just things cost more money to operate. But again, uh, the United States, because I don't find this is the same with Canada, has a really wonky way of looking at education, where it's like this experience that you need to go and you live in the dorms, and then there's these football games, which I understand actually bring a lot of money to the university. So I don't think I should disparage that very much. And to me, that's like a really fascinating. Their alma mater is like when people found out I was going to CU Denver, they're like, oh, okay, cool. And then the same people found out I went to CU or was going to CU Boulder and they had gone, were so excited. And like now all of a sudden we're best friends. And there's this like very interesting identity with your schooling here that we don't experience in Germany and Canada. Like no one talks about Carleton University and is like, that is amazing. That's the best thing you've ever done. Like, okay, no, we just went to school and then we graduated and we moved on with our life. And so I think that our people are willing to pay more for like emotional reasons too. So it's not just the institutions, but people are willing to pay for these institutions for like these emotional connections to family lines and friends. So I guess this is my long-winded answer of saying I don't know why the costs have raised. I think it's a bit of the institutions probably running out of control, the ability for borrowers to get whatever they want and not actually know what's going on when they're signing these pieces of paper at 18. And then this being a huge crash in the middle where we're seeing here in 2022 where people are just out of control in debt. I did want to say that the average debt for an undergraduate student in 2020 is $36,000, which to me is a manageable amount. But then if you have a 7% interest rate on that, then all of a sudden that becomes less manageable. So yeah, so I guess I don't know. It's a long-winded way of giving some thoughts there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like a lot of what you said. And I mean, I'm not a big sports fan, so I didn't really care about the football experience. But yeah, I'm thinking of some of the giant stadiums that hold like 60,000 people or whatever. And yeah, it's a huge thing and it brings in a ton of money. And I think you nailed it where, the borrowers, the students could borrow basically whatever they wanted, and the institutions were able to charge like higher and higher amounts. And I can't quite remember the stats. I didn't do any research for this specifically, but the costs always rise, inflation, cost rise. But I think the education prices like grew like I'm just making up the stat,
Right.
but it grew like 4 or 10x more than like other areas of expenses. So like it definitely outpaced it. And then it's like even harder, not necessarily, but it's difficult potentially to get a job where you can actually pay back the debt. And you mentioned a stat earlier about an acceptable amount of student loan debt coming out of school. Can you mention that here?
Yeah. So when I talk to CPAs and financial professionals, the rule of thumb, whether we want to agree with this or not, is that your total amount of student debt from your 4 to 5 year degree shouldn't equal more than your first year's salary. So if
Okay.
I'm walking out with an average of $36,000 worth of debt, but I'm making $50,000 a year, you're within the threshold from professionals saying, yeah, you did it okay. Like you did it right. If you're walking out at 150, which, those specific career paths we need in our society, but if you're walking out with $150,000 in debt and you're making $45,000 a year at, say, whatever place you're at, you are like, you can't get out from under that one. And and if your potential to grow isn't high, which I think you're probably thinking of the same careers there, you're really limited on how far you can go. And so the ability to pay that back is pretty much non-existent at that point. You're just constantly doing income-based repayments for the rest of your life.
Okay. And I guess this is a good point to talk about canceling of student loan debt. So I haven't spent too much time thinking about this one. I do have some thoughts, and I'll go first here. So actually, I won't go first because I think it may be better if you, or do you want me to? Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can't cop out and put me on the stand here.
All right. So I don't have, like most things, I don't have very strong feelings on it. I think one of the difficulties here is there's a lot of people that didn't go to college, right? There's a lot of people that didn't go to college and they don't have any student loan debt because they didn't need to do that. And I think one of the difficulties is like, all right, we'll forgive whatever 10K of student loan debt, But all the people that didn't go to college and they're doing, great jobs, maybe they're, whatever, fill in jobs, right? There's tons of them out there,
Yeah.
and they don't get anything, right? And everything's not fair. But if they're like productive members of society doing their thing, there's no reason not to recognize like these non-university folks that should get something if the
Mhm.
people with student loans. So any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have thoughts on that because this is a
Okay.
huge debate going on, especially trades versus not like, 4-year academics versus tradespeople. This is like another thing in our country where I think we have like sowing division here. And I actually disagree with you completely. So what happens in a 4-year institution? So say I have $10,000 of my $30,000 or $10,000 worth of loans forgiven. This, although all taxpayers are responsible for this, so are all taxpayers responsible for when someone gets sick at the hospital and doesn't pay when they pay through Medicaid, right? Or Medicare. So then we're forgiving those people's essentially issues and debt, but it's just not as visual. Like we don't see it happening. We also have people who are in the trades who are like, well, why can't I get my truck that I get to? That was one of the things I saw was the direct comparison. So I'm going to use
Yeah.
that as a direct comparison. I buy a truck for my work. I don't get 10,000 of that forgiven, yet the person who went to university to prepare for their education to use that gets their $10,000 done. The person who's in university, A, doesn't have a choice on what their tuition costs are. So they have to sign that paper no matter what if they want to go to it. So I think that's just something to take into account. Secondly, the person who buys a $70,000 truck doesn't necessarily need a $70,000 truck, may not need a truck at all. This is something that's a choice that they're making for their business, that they're making money right away in a return on. And it's a cost of doing business, just like when that student graduates, they have to go and buy a car or a wardrobe to get to the office, and those things won't be forgiven. So I think that to equate the two, although I understand why people might say, why you, not me, isn't the right way to do it, because then we can start saying that about most things in life. Why does a student loan, someone who has student loans, not get that debt forgiven when they go into bankruptcy, yet someone who might get that $10,000 of credit card debt wiped away in bankruptcy with consequences? So then now, I don't know, I feel like they're not apples to apples comparisons. And my biggest gripe with the student loan, $10,000, is what's happening to the institutions? Why is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac still being able to give out these huge student loans? Why are the universities able to charge this amount without consequence? Like, that's where I'm thinking, let's stop talking about the guy who gets a truck and the person who has student loans. Why don't we go to the next source up, which we don't do? We just yell at each other and say,
Right.
why are we actually paying this in the first place?
Yeah. Good points there. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, the one thing I'll challenge you on there, and it could have
Yeah.
just been the phrasing or I heard it wrong, but it was kind of like the student doesn't have a choice on
Mhm.
like going to that school or whatever. And number one, they could go to a different school. They can. I mean, it's easy for me to say, right? I came from a privileged spot. Although I will say I paid for all of my schooling. I didn't get help from my parents or anything like that. I did get the scholarships, which was helpful, but at the end of the day, I worked for those as well. You
Yeah.
don't just show up and you got all the scholarships, but
No.
um, the person can make a choice potentially. Now, obviously, when you're 18 or if you waited a little while and you're still young, I mean, people make mistakes and maybe they went to school and later on they realized, oh shit, this was a bad degree, it was an expensive school for no good reason, and like they're kind of stuck in a spot. So I get that, and as normal, like I don't have a strong stand on it. I mean, I have taken stands, quick tangent, I do take stands on like real estate in different areas, but this stuff I'm not quite sure, and I can understand like if someone does have like 150K of debt and they're only able to make like 40K a year because of the specific degree or maybe the geography they're in or a number of other factors. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you do. I don't know how you get out from under that.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I kind of threw out a bunch of examples that don't like, I was doing like apples to orange
Yeah.
comparisons there, I feel like. And one of the things I do agree with is that I think too many people make the choice to go to university when who shouldn't be going, first of all. They also don't look at other options. Like you said, I worked in the financial aid office for a year at Community College Denver, and I watched these kids do really bad decision making, and no one applies for scholarships. Like we had scholarships that were unfunded. Like we had money for students and no one applied. And so that's like my number one tip to anyone is apply to everything. Even if you're not 100% their candidate, apply for it anyways because there is there are too many scholarships out there and not enough applicants sometimes. And you have a choice to go to community college. Your school might be pressuring, like your high school might be pressuring, your parents might be pressuring you, but eventually you're an adult and you have to make your own decisions. And so to go to CU Boulder for 4 years at $20,000 a year, paying out of pocket or a parent plus loan is a ridiculous thing when you can go down the street for 2 of those 4 years at $3,500 and then bring that in. Like that to me seems that's bad decision making. And yeah, so I agree with you that actually there are choices. And again, I wouldn't leap to the fact that we should or shouldn't. That one I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on if we should or shouldn't actually forgive student loan debt. But the conversation around it, I do have a strong opinion on
Mhm.
in regards to what's fair or not fair.
Well, and part of the conversation, we talked about tuition and how it's risen over the years. So, there's a lot more virtual classes, I think. And, part of it was the pandemic, but I mean, technology has come a long way. So, one of the points you had was should tuition be less because there's more virtual classes and, technically the cost and the admin and the infrastructure should be less. So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I mean, my official stance would be like yes, right? The idea is if you are no longer paying for parts of the services, then you don't like it's
Yeah.
kind of like an airplane nowadays, right? You're like, okay, I don't need to bring my luggage on. So if I'm not like attending in person and putting my bag in the seat, why am I paying for that part of the education? And my Fin talkers had some really good points to counteract me on that because one of them or two of them are actually working at higher education institution. And this is a conversation that these institutions are having and have been forced to have because of the pandemic, but it was going this way anyways, I think, virtual classes. And their stance at this specific university was that they are not going to be reducing prices. They won't, like, there is no reduction in price, there is no change for virtual classes or full time virtual schooling because you're paying for the reputation of the school, you're paying for the research that's coming out of the school. And so, whether I agree with that or not, I don't know. But that was their reasoning that this school, and I would assume most schools, will not reduce tuition based on virtual classes.
Yeah, and I think that's crazy. Um,
Yep.
but I mean, they just think so much of themselves. And, I said I didn't enjoy college too much, but um, yeah, I mean, unless it's like one of the top 5 schools, like probably outside the region, no one gives a shit. You mentioned the school
Yeah.
earlier. We won't mention it here, but I was like, who cares about that school? I don't think that school has a reputation. It's probably regional, I guess. So, yeah, I think, yeah, unless you're kind of like an MBA, right? Unless you're in a
Mhm.
top 10 school, like probably
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You don't have an MBA, right? No.
No, I looked
Okay.
into it and I was like, not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, me too. And I mean, I know a couple people, they took a year or two off, but then it's like opportunity cost and they went to a
Mhm.
very good school. So I think they were able to recoup it pretty quick and it made sense
Yeah.
financially. Um, but yeah, anyway, any other thoughts on the reduction in price or mm,
No, I
that's about
think
it?
I think we're going to see this play out in the next few years. Some universities, my understanding, there are some. I won't mention the institutions, are actually raise price for virtual classes because they want to dissuade students from actually taking those. So that's fascinating to me. That also is like such a great thing for young people, right? In Canada, a lot of my friends stay at home for university. So they go, like here, there's a very big move to a different state, go into a dorm culture for university, but we don't have that in Canada. It happens, but not as much. And the ability to do virtual classes from the comfort of your own home, aka your parents' home, while working and making money makes university much more affordable and accessible to a lot more people, I think. Could be wrong, but um, so to keep prices the same for that virtual access, I don't know.
Did you have many virtual classes?
No.
None.
CU Boulder didn't do those at all. CCD didn't have any. I think maybe, no, I don't even think I had one.
Okay.
Everything in person.
Do you think, or I guess, would you think it would have impacted certain classes, or are there certain classes where you're like, that could have been virtual and I wouldn't have missed anything? Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think a mix is really good, and this one I might not take a full stance on, but here's the way I think about it from my work perspective because I'm fully remote employee. Um, and you need to know the job well to be able to be a motivated work from home employee in my mind, right? So when you're learning virtually can be a lot more difficult because if you're kind of confused all the time and you don't have the motivation, you can start easily dropping off and not showing up. And there's a lot less accountability to your friends who are in class with you, to your peers who are in class with you, and then to your professors who get to know you. So I would say that it depends on the learner, whether or not this is like something that they can do easily. And for me, for university, being in person was really beneficial. I don't know if I would have finished my 4-year degree if I didn't go in person.
Okay. Gotcha.
What about you?
Um, what was the question?
Like, how do you think virtual would have changed your experience? And like,
Oh,
could you do it?
gotcha. So virtual. I think it would have been okay. I'm a pretty good self-studier and learner in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And like to the point where not so much in college, but in high school, I would like read ahead and like basically do the lesson on my own. So when like went to class, like sometimes I already kind of knew it and it was kind of review only
Yeah.
for certain classes. But yeah, I'm sort of self-motivated and also a lot of times I'll say I'm introverted, but I think I'm maybe like the what is it?
Ambi, yeah,
Yeah.
ambivert.
So I think I might be more like that. So I am totally okay, like not being in a more social setting and blah, blah, blah. I did always go to, classes, missed very few, maybe like
Yeah.
2% or so, like 1%, very few.
Yeah.
And I think I would have mostly been okay. A lot of the, big classes where there's, 200 people in there, like you're not having like one-on-one conversations with a professor anyway. A lot of that was in office hours with TAs or, some other tutor type person. So I think it would have been mostly okay. There were a couple like lab classes, which of course you got to be in there. You do get like individual help. And I think those are the kind of classes where, maybe now the technology is advanced enough and like you could have like a camera over your circuit board or whatever
Mhm.
and actually have someone say, "Oh yeah, do this, do that," and it would be okay virtually. So I think potentially mine would have been totally okay, but that is because I'm a little bit odd and can like just work on my own and you know, I can learn on my own in many ways. So
Yeah. And I think, again, like that would be a cool thing to have this hybrid approach where some people who can do virtual, and who can't. My entire 4-year degree could have been virtual. There is nothing that I
oh
needed to be
yeah.
in those classrooms for. Nothing at all. A leadership class, no, I could do that easily virtually. So, yeah, and I think it depends on the age of the student as well. Like you said, if someone is not having as much life experience, going in there and having a professor critique the way that you're dressed, how you're speaking, what that looks like, how you come off like with your posture, um, shouldn't be the role of the professor, but it is part of that education when it comes to the young students who are 18 years old.
Yep. Very
Yeah.
good. So we're kind of winding down here. Do you have any other points you want to cover real quick? And then I have kind of a final question we can wrap up with.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I just would love to challenge people who are parents or aunts and uncles or grandparents is, why do you think your kid needs to go to university, and especially right away? And that's someone who, again, traveled the world for 6 years, found myself, like learned what what it is I wanted and what it is I didn't want. Uh, it was such an incredible experience for me to go back to academia and like apply myself in a whole different way. I could tell that I was very different than the younger students. And being able to take a gap year like the Aussies do, some Canadians do, like that really should be an option for your children and for your friends and family and people, not just this pushing of a 4-year degree. Or like we do in Canada, we're pretty big in the trades here. So almost, I would say my high school is, a lot of people went to university and a lot of them went to trades, and they're still tradespeople today making very good money as plumbers, electricians, handymen. And it's a completely viable option, a bunch of other career paths that do not require someone at 18 years old just to continue what they've been doing for 18 years.
Yep. And I heard on a podcast, I can't remember which one, but it was some entrepreneur type thing. And he hired an electrician. I think it was out of Austin. He hired an electrician and was chatting with the guy. And what's your guess for like an electrician in, a big city in Texas? What do you think they make a year? And I think it's not like the owner. He just has like,
Right.
say, like one truck, his own equipment. Yeah. What do you think he pulls in?
Yeah. 130,000 a year.
He said 200. So he's
No
making
freaking
200.
way.
Yeah. So like maybe, again, I think you're like 10 years behind me or so. So like
Yeah.
20 years ago, like electrician, it's like, do they make much? But that was just like one dude doing what he wanted, 200K. Like imagine if you were like, you know what? I'm gonna have like a small fleet. I'll have a few people.
Yeah.
You stop going out on call. Like you can make a ton of money if you were a little, business savvy and you had the trade skills. So I would definitely look at those areas. I mean, it's such a in the market today, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you can like get paid while you're apprenticing and it's a highly skilled like thing. So okay.
Yeah.
Final question here, and you maybe kind of answered it indirectly, but looking back, you went through a what looks to be a three-phase college career over about 10 years or so. If you could just
Yep.
go back, and I'm not looking for like, do you have any regrets? But if you were like, if I could plan it, what would I do now? So if you could go back and rejigger it, what would you have done?
Literally nothing different. I think getting my feet wet to be able to make friends and party my face off for a year and a half and realize like, I don't love alcohol that much was a great experience without putting $40,000 of LMU debt into my bank account or my net worth. And then having that little stint in Tucson, I wouldn't have done the second semester. Which is really inconsequential, but I knew I didn't want to go. I still didn't feel confident in learning. Wasn't I wasn't confident in myself at that time. And that first semester was great to get my feet wet, but I really didn't like it. It was something I was doing to pass the time so that I could date someone and then eventually break up with them. So, like, I could have just gone maybe without that phase, but I think without that little bit of like, well, I did it, I know how to navigate this, I don't know if I would have easily have integrated into the next phase, which was when I really got serious. Did Khan Academy every single night after like you did. Like I tried to work ahead. Math I hadn't done in 10 years at that point. I feel like each one of those little pieces prepped me to do it right for the 4 years I ended up really buckling down and doing it. And if I were to go back, I just wouldn't stress as much about money because $40,000 over 2 years is a lot. But I put myself under a lot of stress of whether or not I should even go and finish my degree. And that's what I think I would have gone back and said, hey, Amberly, just like chill out. Like you're going to make good money. You can pay this back. Don't question your entire life on $40,000.
Very good. Well, for me, I think I would go to LMU and party for a couple years as a
Yeah.
gap 2 years. And no, I probably would have a gap year or two would have been good to just travel around. I
Yeah.
think that would have been pretty fun. And like you said, you get some life experience, you get to figure a few things out and just, you don't have many responsibilities at that point in your life. So it's a good time to go just mess around. So that would have been good. And I think I maybe would have looked at a couple different schools where like maybe you transfer in and out and like dual degree kind of stuff. I think that could have been interesting. And then the complete left turn is I had a lawn care business in high school. And
Yeah.
there was a small business owner that I cut grass for, and he sold his business. And he was like, "Hey man, you got a good thing going. You can get a little crew and you have good customer service." And I was like 17, right? He was like, "You're
Yeah.
pretty good like working with the customers and stuff, but you can like organize this and have a nice little business." And I was from the Atlanta area, which grew a lot of residential, a lot of commercial. Like potentially, it would have made more sense for me just to run with that for like
Yeah.
2 or 3 years, and then I mean, I probably could have benefited from like some very light business classes, but really, I probably could have gone to like a entrepreneurship group and just like learned from small business owners that were like actually doing stuff and like completely skip school and not really care. But that's completely different. So,
Yeah, but that's an alternative life. I get that completely because I had a business and I shut it down to go to school to learn how to do business. And so I completely understand that maybe if you just persevered a little bit longer in that one and had the resources that you needed or knew where they were, yeah, you could have made something of it. And I get
yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And it could be a whole other conversation, but what was your business? But as we wrap up here, what was your business that you shut down to go to school?
Yeah, I worked with luxury apartment buildings in Denver, Colorado, and I did film screenings for like food, so like snacks and film screenings about different food things, like and then cooking classes and workshops, so how to make pasta, how to do juicing, that type of thing. And then I had the side business that was really growing, which was preparing meals for people for dinner and lunch and dropping them off daily in Pyrex dishes to their fridges so that they would, like for working professionals, have five meals 5 days a week,
Oh,
which
that's
is
pretty
now a
cool.
billion-dollar industry called Blue Apron and HelloFresh and everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, yeah. And I was gonna say like that works, and then I'm sure during the pandemic time frame, like that kind of stuff maybe did well. I don't know.
Yeah, it did
Uh,
well for me. I paid for Hello Apron for HelloFresh for a while.
oh man, it's so expensive. But
Yeah,
okay,
I was flipping a house.
last thing. So tell us just a little bit more about FinTalks. How could people sign up if they want to check it out?
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to find me, Instagram is Amberly Grant. So AMBERLYGRANT. So you can find me there. I answer my DMs personally. So if you message me, I'll say hello. If you want to join FinTalks, amberlygrant.com has a little link and you can put your email address in there. I only allow 3-ish new people a week on it. So as this podcast comes out, I'll probably have like 20 people who are interested. So just expect that you'll get a link probably within a month or two to join. I don't like to overwhelm the group with new people because we're actually quite tight and really enjoy having new people come in, but you need to integrate into our little community. So those are great ways of doing it. I'm also starting my TikTok channel that I've been using. So I've been putting videos up there, which is just Amberly Grant, and having a unique name means that I get pretty much my name on every platform, which is awesome.
Very cool. And can you let us know what a new person on FinTalks might expect? So you said there's like 40 or 50 people. Like
Mhm.
if someone shows up and they're brand
Yeah.
new, like what happens?
Well, you get to interact with me, which I'm sorry in advance. So if you're a new person, our group is so welcoming and inviting. We have two kind of sections of our group, which is the visual part. So I encourage everyone to have their cameras on. About 2/3 of people do have their cameras on for the entire talk. If you're eating spaghetti, maybe turn it off. I don't know. And then we have the chat portion. So people who just really don't like to speak can do in the chat, can interact in the chat, and that just like goes off. It's really fun. If you're joining for the very first time, I will call you out and ask you to put your camera on and tell me your first and last name, your location, because guess what? We're all around the country and it's fun to connect in person. And then 3, what is a fun financial fact? So it could be like, to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it costs 3 cents to eat that, right? Whatever you want to do for your financial fun fact. And then just note that I may call on you in the call. Like I like to host it where everyone can talk. There are people who dominate more than others in the sense that like people are comfortable speaking, but I will bring you into the fold, again, whether in the chat or on screen, and I'll get to know your personality a little bit so that I don't embarrass you or anything. But yeah, there is swearing from time to time, but everyone has really cool opinions, and I guarantee you'll get a little something out of it, being either kind of silent in the background for the first couple or joining weekly and it contributing.
Okay. So even if someone's a little shy, pretty low barrier, and you may call on people, but it's just to get the conversation going, not to like pick on someone who's distracted or anything like that. It's not like a class.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I'm not
cool.
really
It's cool.
interested in that. Like, yeah, the really cool thing is, as I said, like my personality comes out in this, but I'm just a curious person, and so I like to bring that bits of adventure and curiosity to each person in that call.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks, Amberly. We'll put links for all the stuff, and it was great talking to you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me and chatting.
Thanks for listening to the show. That was the Mile High Five podcast, and I'm Doug Cunnington, the balder host, and Carl Jensen is the cool, sexy one. If you dig the show, please do 3 things for us. Number 1, tell a friend, a family member, an enemy about the show. We really don't care who you tell. Maybe forward them a specific show that you know that they will like. It's the single most helpful thing that you can do to spread the word. It's like giving us a virtual high five, and actually we don't give high fives in person, so the virtual kind's pretty good. And more importantly, your friend or family member or even your enemy will appreciate the fact that you were thinking of them. Number 2, make sure you're following or subscribed on your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, YouTube, whatever you're using, and that way you won't miss a show. And number 3, please leave us a rating and review. We read them on the show occasionally, and you might hear yours out there on an upcoming episode. Quick disclaimer, this show is not financial or legal advice. I'd actually be surprised if it sounded like it. It's really just for entertainment, and that's at least what we're hoping for. But seriously, get advice from professionals. Carl and I are just 2 guys with microphones that sit in my basement and talk. So we'll catch y'all next week.